Why is Iran's Revolutionary Guard suddenly screaming about piracy when 5 straight weeks of American bombs barely made them flinch? Something happened this Monday that might decide whether the regime survives the month. For 5 weeks, American and Israeli planes bombed Iran, hitting the targets you have heard about: nuclear sites, missile bases, military command centers. They even took out Iran's supreme leader. It was loud, it was dramatic, and it did less than you would think. Then last Monday, Trump did something much quieter and much more dangerous. He ordered the U.S. Navy to blockade Iranian ports. Not the Strait of Hormuz, because closing the strait would hurt everybody, and Trump is not in the business of hurting the global economy. No, he told the Navy to let the world's ships pass through like normal, but the ships going to Iran or coming from Iran, those ships, the Navy would stop. So since Monday, the Navy has turned 21 ships around, and the USS Gerald Ford, the biggest aircraft carrier in the American fleet, is parked in the region to back it up. Tankers loading oil at Iran's main petrochemical port are just sitting there, nowhere to go. And the reaction has been loud. Iran's Revolutionary Guard put out a statement calling the American blockade, and I'm quoting them directly, piracy and maritime theft. Now think about that for a second. The Iranian government is calling the American Navy a bunch of pirates. The same Iranian government that was firing missiles at commercial ships in the Red Sea through the Houthis just 4 months ago. Pirates. Okay. Iran's resolution was to close the strait again after opening it for less than 1 day, and Iranian gunboats fired on a tanker yesterday morning, and that is where Iran's problems start piling up, because 2 of the ships Iranian gunboats fired at this weekend were Indian, as in from India, a country with 1.5 billion people, a country Iran has spent years calling a friendly nation. So India summoned the Iranian ambassador. The Indian government is furious, and Iran just made a brand new enemy in the middle of a war for no reason at all. And then we have Europe. Remember how Europe spent the last 5 weeks pretending to be neutral on all of this? And that is over. On Friday, Macron and Starmer held an online meeting, and I am not making this up, for a defensive multilateral mission to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, which is a very European way of saying we are forming a coalition to help the Americans. So the scoreboard this week: Iran's Revolutionary Guard is screaming, India is furious at Iran, Europe is quietly joining the American side at last, and the regime in Tehran is running out of friends. Now, if you have been watching the mainstream media this week, you would think the world is about to end and the gas is going to hit $12 a gallon by next Tuesday. Every anchor, every panel, every talking head explaining to you that Trump has gone too far. He is destabilizing the global economy. Markets are panicking. Allies are furious. And we are on the brink of collapse. This is what you do when you don't have an argument. You use false urgency. You pick the scariest number. You turn the volume up and you hope nobody does the math. So let me pour a little cold water on that. The United States produces more oil than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. That's it for a second. More than Saudi Arabia and Russia added together. America does not need Iran's oil for gasoline, and America has not needed it for a long time. The Strait of Hormuz matters enormously to Japan, Korea, India, and most of Europe, but it barely matters to the pump you fill up at. What does matter is the global price, because oil trades on a world market, and when the world is uncertain, prices go up, so gas at your local station creeps a little higher. That part is real. I have explained it in a previous video. But here's what the Trump administration did about it. 2 weeks ago, Treasury issued brand new energy licenses for Venezuela, a country that happens to sit on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. And the administration is quietly letting that oil back into the world market. Not because Washington is a fan of the regime down there. I have seen up close what that regime does to a country, and the White House knows exactly what it is too. They are letting the oil flow because more oil on the world market means lower prices at your pump. A pressure valve, and it is working. So your gas bill in July is probably going to look pretty normal. But here's the real story, and it is the piece that pulls everything together. If American gas prices are fine, and Europe is joining the coalition, and Iran is losing friends, then why is the Revolutionary Guard screaming about piracy like their lives depend on it? Well, when you think about a country's military, you probably picture the American version. Soldiers paid by the government out of tax dollars, a Pentagon budget approved by Congress every year, the standard stuff. Iran does not work that way. Iran has a regular army, yes, but then it has the Revolutionary Guard, and the Revolutionary Guard is something much stranger. It is a state inside a state. It owns businesses, it runs banks, it controls ports, it even runs Tehran's international airport. Analysts estimate that companies connected to the Revolutionary Guard control more than half of the entire Iranian economy. So let me make that real for you. Imagine if in America, one single organization owned Walmart and Amazon and Google, plus half the banks, plus all the ports, plus most of the oil companies, and imagine that same organization had its own private army with missiles and drones. And imagine that army was the one making the decisions about war and peace. That is the Revolutionary Guard in Iran. Now, how do they pay for all of that? Not from taxes. They pay for it with smuggled oil, sold at a discount to anyone willing to break sanctions, which mostly is China. That smuggled oil is what buys their missiles, their drones, and their proxy groups from Lebanon and all the way down to Yemen. So remember this contrast. 5 weeks of American and Israeli bombs hit the buildings. The blockade hits the bank account. So when the Revolutionary Guard calls the blockade piracy, they are not acting tough. They are panicking. Because this is the first thing in the entire war that threatens their actual money. And without the money, they are a militia with aging equipment and no paycheck. So, where does this leave us by Wednesday? The ceasefire deadline is April 22nd, and Pakistan Foreign Minister said over the weekend that the two sides are very close to a deal, which usually means somebody is about to fold. And here's one more layer. Trump meets Xi Jinping in a few weeks, and China happens to buy more Iranian smuggled oil than any other country on earth. So this blockade is also quietly a message to Beijing. Work with Washington on Iran and trade talks open up. Don't, and your chip supplier just went offline. That is why Xi quietly offered this week to take Iran's leftover enriched uranium off their hands. Xi wants leverage before that summit. 5 days. Let's see what they do. So if you want my deeper analysis on geopolitics and markets, go check my new blog, The Power Pundit. I can say things there that I'm not allowed to say anywhere else. Link in description. And share this video with your family and friends so they know what's really going on. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm The Power Pundit. Much love and bliss.